Crowther's story, Hand in Glove, the adventures of a Punch and Judy man.
They say that everyone learns from experience. A Punch and Judy man certainly does. My second summer in the business, I rented a pitch on the sands at Ayr in Scotland. I received no salary and had to depend on what I collected from the audience. I hadn't realized that for this type of work you need your own collector, or bottler as it's called in the business. Why the collection is called the bottle, I've never been able to discover. I can only suppose that originally it was made in a bottle instead of a bag, perhaps so that the collector could see what the spectators were giving, which might make them give a bit more. I've been told that an open collection plate in a church will yield more than a bag for the same reason. As I had no bottler, I had to go round with a hat myself after the show. I soon discovered that this was no good at all. As soon as people saw me approaching, they walked away. I couldn't even get within 10 feet of them. They shunned me like the plague. I couldn't believe that people who'd enjoyed the show could be so mean. I sat down and thought the matter over. I decided to do half the show and then make punch pass out a fishing net on a long stick. If people wouldn't pay me, I felt certain they wouldn't refuse their old friend Mr. Punch. After my first attempt at this new method of collection, I changed my views about human beings. I passed the net out and then brought it back a little way so that I could peep over the top to see what it contained. There were 2 pennies and a shilling in it. I passed it out again. This time, somebody took the shilling and in its place put 2 stones and a piece of silver paper. I made a third attempt and then finished the performance. I counted my takings: 7 halfpenny, 3 stones, and a milk bottle top. I began to panic. I was miles away from home and had only enough money left to pay a week's lodging, as all my savings had gone on the rent of the pitch for the season. But I couldn't afford to pay a bottler, even if I could have found one. The only thing to do was to break the show in the middle and go round with a hat myself. It was still no good. Very few people gave more than a penny. Most of the children had no money, or said they had none, but I could see them through the peephole in the booth buying ice creams during the second half of the show. A couple of times the Salvation Army bottled my pitch while I was doing the first half of the show, and the audience told me they'd already given something. This really made me see red. The next time the Salvation Army started their singing, I was out of my booth before you could say Jack Robinson and collecting money from their flock. They couldn't very well say anything at the time, but one of them came over afterwards and told me what I was in the choicest Billingsgate language, which convinced me that he wasn't really saved at all. I was fighting a losing battle and decided to pack up and call it a day, hoping that I could hitchhike my way home. As I started to dismantle the show, I noticed a young fellow watching me. He seemed very interested in my activity and finally came over to me. "How you putting out?" he asked. I told him my troubles and he listened sympathetically. He introduced himself as Bob Lines and told me that for some years he'd played the accordion on the Clyde pleasure steamers. He was about 5'6" and thin as a rake, and he spoke with a broad Glasgow accent. He noticed that I had difficulty understanding him and laughed. "You don't get what I'm saying? You'll get used to it as we get to know one another." I asked him how this was to be, seeing that I was about to leave Scotland. He told me he was shortly embarking on a tour of the Highlands with his accordion and suggested that I should team up with him. "But I've already decided to go home," I said. "Oh, you're kidding. You can't go back and let your man know you've been a flop." He certainly had a point. That was the last thing I wanted to do. "You're right," I said. "Let's become partners. How about you being my bottler and us staying here for the season?" Bob was convinced we'd do better up north. He was sure a Punch and Judy show would be well received by the villagers. It was something they'd all heard about, but very few had actually seen one. I've got a wee tent with me living, and I'm a bit of a poacher, so it wouldn't cost a lot for food. We finally agreed that I should work the Punch and Judy show on the sands for a few more days, until we collected enough money to pay our fares to the Highlands. And thanks to Bob's skill as a bottler, this only took 4 days. I've often heard about Highland hospitality, but never imagined the villagers could be as generous as they were. After our first performance, which we gave on the village green, we seldom had to use the little tent. There was always someone with a bedroom for us, and invitations to meals came from every direction. We pitched the booth on village greens, at street corners, and in inn yards. Several times we were invited to give our entertainment in the drawing rooms of country mansions to the family and their domestic staff, when we received very good fees, and often stayed the night and had dinner with the family. It was on one of these occasions that I first tasted haggis. I'll just give you a wee bit in case you don't like it. You can have some more if you do. The whole family watched as I put the first morsel in my mouth, and they could see by my expression that I was converted to the great chieftain of the pudding race, as Robert Burns called it. When I started on my second helping, the master of the house winked at the rest of the family, and turning to me, he said, "I knew you'd like that. It's the first we've had since the haggis shooting season started." "Yes," I said. "I could tell by the taste that it was one of the bearded variety they shoot in the Trossachs." This remark amused the family. "So, you've a sense of humor as well," said the master of the house. This led to my telling them my exploits as a Punch and Judy man. When the evening came to a close, the old gentleman said I should write a book of my adventures. I told him I would, but many years were to pass before I put pen to paper. Sometimes Bob and I hired village halls and ran dances. He supplied the music with his accordion, while I acted the MC and did the puppet show as a cabaret. Bob seemed to be able to play every Scottish tune that had ever been written. More than once the caretaker was so pleased with the entertainment that he refused to take a fee for the use of the hall. The village girls turned up in their best dresses, and the men who had kilts always put them on. These dances were always great occasions, and often we carried on with our eights and reels until the early hours of the morning. Sometimes local musicians came along and augmented the band. They always refused to take money for their services and were delighted to play just for the fun of it. One of them, a big fellow called MacDonald, was a piper in the Black Watch, and he certainly put a lot of life into the dancing. We were pleased when he offered to join us on his week's holiday. He played outside the Punch and Judy booth to attract attention, which he certainly did. After one show, a man came up and asked if we would perform in his pub. We readily agreed, and when we arrived, he had a meal waiting for us. As soon as we'd had our fill, I fitted the booth up in the bar. I was a little scared when I saw his customers were mostly old men, but as soon as I'd started, I heard their hearty laughter and knew that Mr. Punch had made some more friends. After the puppet show, Bob took over with his accordion and began to play a selection of Scottish songs. At once, the old fellow's laughter turned into singing, which carried on well beyond closing time. At Forfar, we were engaged to entertain at a wedding. It was funny to hear the remarks of the guests as Punch knocked Judy about with his stick. They all pulled the bride's leg, telling her that was how her husband would treat her after the honeymoon, when the novelty had worn off. With the comedy interruptions, the show ran longer than usual, and the newly married couple nearly missed their train. At Forres, a young gypsy girl asked if we'd go to their camp and do the show for her sister, who had been ill and couldn't see it. We agreed, and she led us to a nearby wood where several caravans stood. The gypsy sat on the grass while I worked the puppets. An old gypsy woman told my fortune and revealed that I would travel much, never make a fortune, but never want. This has proved an accurate forecast. Another woman gave me a basket of primroses, and a third a dozen homemade paints. Then they invited us to have a meal with them. "Can you guess what you'll be eating?" asked the young girl when we finished. I guessed rabbit, while Bob said it was lamb. "You're both wrong," she laughed. "It's hotty witchy." I asked her what that was, and found it was the Romany for hedgehog. I often wonder if we would have enjoyed it as much if we'd known what it was beforehand. I found a great difference between the town and country audiences. The townsfolk didn't like to be seen watching what they considered a childish show. They'd stand well away looking with a sideways glance, pretending they were just waiting for someone, and would stroll off when Bob went round with a hat. The villagers were quite different. They stood there and thoroughly enjoyed it, and were all willing to give us something. Those who joined the show after the collector had been round would often pop their heads into the back of the booth and hand me some money, while those who had to leave before the end would put a pile of coppers or a piece of silver onto the playboard before they walked off. Others would give money to the children without any, for them to pop into the hat. One village we stayed in was holding a harvest supper, and as we were leaving the Highlands the next day, it was turned into a farewell party for Bob and myself. The tables groaned with the weight of the food. There was chicken, pheasant, roast sucking pig, oat cakes, and all kinds of scones. The local women must have been baking for the past week. Homemade wine, beer, and Scottish whisky were all there for everyone to help themselves to. I gave my last Punch and Judy show before the feast started. Bob played on, and I thought the party would never end. Next morning, lots of villagers came to see us off on the bus and loaded us with food for the journey. As they waved us goodbye, a lump came into my throat, and I wished my Highland adventures didn't have to come to an end. It was the happiest season I'd ever had. And after paying all my expenses, I returned home with nearly £60 in my pocket.